Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories. This is an extra special edition. I technically don't have permission to record this fic yet from the fic authors because it's a collaboration. So I'm making this just for me and my friend, who is currently going by the username Bitchin' Roxy. So we're trying something new today where I am literally reading Roxy a bedtime story. We're in Discord. I have a server now. We're in Discord voice channel. So I'm recording this podfic on my e-reader like I usually do. And Roxy is listening on the voice channel to go to sleep to it. So this is going to be a very chill, fun, interesting time. We're reading a story called My Big Fat Wolf Wedding, which is Stucky. That's Steve, Bucky, Captain America, and the Winter Soldier. So it's a Stucky fic. And you might hear me typing occasionally. I've got a really nice, well, I don't know if nice, high quality, but I like it, so it's nice. It's an RGB backlit keyboard. It's one of those mini keyboards. It's like 61 keys. And I've got it set up to slowly fade through the RGB background. And it's got the mechanical typing action. So listen to my keyboard. Keystrokes. So satisfying. Um, Tags. This is rated teen and up. We already talked about the fandom and the pairing. It's Steve and Bucky, and Natasha makes a appearance. Author's additional tags: alternate universe, supernatural elements, vampires, werewolves, fluff and humor, accidental marriage, Sir, That's My Emotional Support Werewolf, Lumberjack Adams Family, and Mistaken Identity Supernatural Species Roulette. It was originally published in 2021, and it's got just over 12K words, so it'll probably take me about 2 to 3 hours total to record. I don't know if I'm able to do it all in one go, even though it's just one chapter. It's not just anything, but it is only one chapter. But let's see how far I get today before I get IRL interrupted. I'm not going to read the summary because it's an excerpt from the fic. We'll get there soon. Notes from the author. This is inspired by I'm a Sucker for a Wild Boy by Jin Linny. A bunch of us riffed about the cross-cultural wedding farce potential sparked by Jin Linley's I'm a Sucker for a Wild Boy, which, side note, that is also a really funny fic. You should read it. And the basic premise is a werewolf who had never met a vampire before gets bit by a vampire and thinks that the vampire has just mated them because that's how the werewolves mate. And the vampire has no fucking clue what just happened either because they don't know shit about werewolves. So hilarious. Thanks to Nindian for the title and to General FATWS Fandom Energy for reviving this draft. Okay, except for the fact that that's an F in the front, I would guess it was Captain America, the Winter Soldier fandom. So it's either a typo or it's something, some fandom thing that I don't know. All right, I'm going to take a sip of tea, and we're going to get started with the story. Let me move my keyboard out of the way. I'm going to put the e-reader right in front of me for maximum comfort. Roxy, if you're still awake, give me like a thumbs up or something for the sound quality. Is this still working for you with my current positioning? Awesome. Here we go. Steve wakes up after what should have been a perfectly normal evening to a burly lumberjack drooling into his collarbone. He lifts his head cautiously, wincing and raising his palm to cover the bandage on his neck when the bite underneath flares into pain with the movement and stares down at the man who made the bandage necessary. He'd been hoping that the surreal confusion of last night was due to hunger, sleep deprivation, and blood loss. But now he's very well fed and very well rested, and yet the very large man lying on top of him, like the world's most muscular weighted blanket, wearing nothing but a pair of red buffalo plaid boxers, is still stubbornly real and just as baffling as he had been the night before. Side note, hey Roxy, one of the reasons I picked this fic to read to you for your bedtime story is because of the fic idea that you were pitching to me earlier. Um, I'm not going to say any details here because I don't want to spoiler it for anybody if you decide to write it. But you know what I'm talking about, right? That meme with the pizza? Yeah. So that's what made me think you might enjoy this fic. Okay. Stubbornly real and just as baffling as he had been the night before. The bite on his neck, is already healed, which seems a little unfair. Steve got turned during the last Irish famine, and he's been merrily trucking along ever since. Everything more or less as expected, until now. The pale, undead part of vampirism was pretty much as advertised, and it's not like he didn't know about the dietary requirements in advance. His allergy to sunlight wasn't really news either, but it disappeared when his sire had gotten staked anyway. So he's been able to wander around pretty freely and meet people in social situations and, well, bite them. Folks are usually into it or don't notice, but when they do notice, it follows a predictable pattern of yell, flail, and run that gives Steve plenty of time to apologize and vanish into the night. A vampiric specialty. That's in parentheses, by the way. Nobody's ever bitten him back. And this nice lumberjack is extremely warm, and Steve would be fine staying here, comfortable under the covers despite the itch of his neck knitting back together. Except he's never ever taken any of his hookups back to his apartment where he lives. Italicized. Steve is a responsible sort, he likes to think. He takes less than even the blood bank would, and never drips on anyone's shirt. He certainly hadn't planned to accidentally lure anyone to his vampiric third floor lair last night. They'd been in the alley behind the club, the music almost tolerable once it was muffled by brick walls. Oh my god. I've never actually been to a club in person, but like all the movie scenes I've seen of it, it just seems so overwhelming. Like, I really enjoy club music, but I don't think I would enjoy the club experience. I went to an outdoor concert once, and that was incredibly overwhelming. I was so overstimulated, I fell asleep in the stands in the middle of a Nickelback concert. I did wake up for 3 Days Grace, though, because that's what I was there for. Where was I? Yeah. The music almost tolerable once it was muffled by brick walls. And Steve had taken his time kissing his chosen donor for the evening. The man had been the biggest guy in the club, if not by height, then by breadth. And when it comes to who could handle a little blood loss, volume counts. You know, it's funny. I was having a discussion with redacted identity for privacy reasons. I was having a discussion with someone recently about how I personally think that kissing is just so gross. Like the noises, the fluid exchange, the level of personal contact involved. You, right? But when Blorbos do it, it's just like, so I'm glad that somebody's happy and like they enjoy it. Like it's so funny reading fics that are explicitly sexual when I am ace personally And like most sex acts, I don't enjoy being performed upon my person or even the thought of it. I'm just like, eh. But like when the Blorbos get it on, it's just so deeply satisfying to me that the Blorbos are enjoying it. And I'm like so happy that they can enjoy themselves and have a good time. And like without feeling like a voyeur, sometimes I just think it's hot. So weird. People are so weird. I do think it's really funny though that I'm not the only person that experiences that. Like there's an entire term, AEGO, ageosexual, whatever. Where like fictional characters getting it on is what, turns your crank. Anyway, back to the story. The man had been the biggest guy in the club, if not by height, then by breadth. And when it comes to who can handle a little blood loss, volume counts. Enthusiastic, too, returning Steve's smile readily and following Steve out the back doors after a couple minutes of mostly gestured conversation. And touching him eagerly, sliding hot hands under his shirt and rubbing over his back like he was trying to warm Steve up. It was sweet. He was sweet. Right up until Steve carefully detached his fangs and licked over the punctures to close them. And the man had smiled up at him, huge and joyful, with what Steve had thought was the feeding haze. And then, faster than even Steve could blink, he'd cupped the side of Steve's face and bitten down in a perfect mirror of the mark Steve left on him. It was probably hypocritical to be so shocked. Maybe he should have felt threatened or offended. But the man was so happy about it and sort of caressing Steve's neck and then his own with a kind of radiant joy that left Steve feeling like somehow he was the one who was out of step. With his head still swimming from the blood high, weirdly stronger than it had been with anyone he picked up before, Steve had retreated to the safety of his home, only mildly concerned that the man was following him step for step. It had been easier to collapse into bed and shove his second pillow vaguely in the guy's direction than to figure out what had happened and why he was there. I don't know, fellas. Have you ever been so tired and food coma that you just let them follow you home? He doesn't have the excuse of pseudo drunkenness now. He's woken up first. But the man is still here, and now Steve has to figure out what to do about it. His first instinct is to sneak out of the apartment before the man wakes up and move to a new country. But he's been in New York several decades now and only just found a place. The just was italicized, by the way. Just found a place with really fresh endives? What the hell is that? Let's find out. Duck Duck says endives are a leafy vegetable plant. Bitter leafed vegetables. Okay, but how do I pronounce it?
Endive.
Endive. Hey, I was right. Only just found a place with really fresh endives. So instead, he lies very still and rubs the tender skin of his throat, elbow tucked in so he doesn't jostle his unexpected guest, who's taking up 2/3 of the bed without even trying. Part of what's making him feel off balance is that Steve is no longer used to situations where he feels svelte, as it were. Okay, I'm pretty sure I said that word correctly, but I am not 100% sure, so we're going to double check it too.
Svelte.
Svelte, yes. In case you've never come across it, svelte means slender or graceful in figure or outline. Slim. Refined, delicate, or gracefully slender. While health issues and a famine don't really make for a strong stature, he had gained a lot of height and bulk pretty soon after being turned. That bulk doesn't seem as imposing now. His personal heated duvet has his arms wrapped around Steve's chest, and even when Steve, fascinated, flexes a little, the lumberjack's biceps are still impressive in comparison. He loses a minute or two staring at the man's shoulders out of academic curiosity, just to see if they match. Eventually, his useless brain stops prompting him to change his name and flee to Canada, and instead coughs up the suggestion of calling Natasha. How do we like Natasha? 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 Nat? Natasha. Steve seizes on this plan like a life raft and gingerly detaches from the beef slab trying to cuddle him, which takes 5 minutes and involves stuffing his own pillow into the man's arms, so he'll grab that instead. He finds his own pants. Hold on. Pause. You gotta plug in the Chromebook. All right. Back in business. Steve seizes on this plan like a life raft and gingerly detaches from the beef slab trying to cuddle him, which takes 5 minutes and involves stuffing his own pillow into the man's arms, so he'll grab that instead. He finds his own pants slung over the dresser, fishes his phone out of a pocket, and cranks the volume all the way down before dialing. Steve has lived a long time, but that's nothing comparable to the breadth of Natasha's experience. She hurtles through existence like there are checkpoints she needs to hit. Felonies. Steve hasn't ever aimed for the quiet life, but Natasha had blown into his address book like a hurricane during the Troubles in 1954 and has remained there like a banked storm ever since. Currently, she owes him one for hiding a griffin egg in his cold room, so she'll at least take his call. It's before noon, Natasha answers. Lyft is a thing if you need a ride before you conk out. Steve doesn't know quite how to TLDR his current situation, so he just sort of scans his new lumberjack acquaintance from shaggy, rumpled head to charmingly crooked toe and hopes that Natasha will just get it. It's not as far fetched as it sounds. Steve has known Natasha for 6 decades, and he's only mostly sure she's not telepathic. Unless my very good friend Steve has already passed out, and you went with emergency contact 1, in which case his passcode is 762. Really? You just give out my passcode like that? Steve says, keeping his voice down. Really? You just give out my passcode like that? Vocal control. So easy when you only need to breathe, talk. I am a busy woman and also currently staring down a demon. Really? If I look away, I give up dominance, Steve. Why are you up this early? Steve looks at the mostly naked man snoring on his bed and tries to weigh the urgency of his situation versus Natasha's demon staring. I'm not distracting you? Natasha scoffs. I can stare and talk at the same time. If you had trouble getting your vitamin B last night, we can't help you. I used Clint's blood for the demon summoning ritual, and he's upstairs with a juice box. I wonder if it's grape or apple or other. No, that's not the problem. Steve tilts his head and feels the bones settle into place. He feels good, awake. Gee, I wonder what that feels like. Normally, this time of day, he'd be packed full of cotton wool and ready to roll over for a few more hours' sleep. That's relatable at all times. Instead, he feels downright peppy. I ate earlier, but there was a complication. I have a someone in my bed. Natasha waits for a second, like Steve will somehow become more helpful. Giving up on using his words, he snaps a picture and sends it to her. Oh, he found a werewolf. How do you know he's a werewolf? Steve asks, double taking at the apparent werewolf wrapped around his second best pillow, like he maybe missed some fangs or claws or pointed ears. Oh my god, I also have a best pillow and a second best pillow, like favored pillows. And you know how you sort pillows, like by which pillowcase you put on them too? Like my favorite pillow gets the nicest pillowcase that I have, and it goes on down the line to the shitty ones that I let my nieces sleep on. They get the most uncomfortable pillowcases because they don't care. And like the little pillows that lost all their stuffing and have no fluff or support anymore, my pillows are definitely ranked. Auras, Natasha says, which is her vague excuse for most things. Why are we buying banana jello shots? Auras. Where did Clint get that khaki shirt? Auras. How are we going to break into that bank? Why are we going to break into that bank? Auras. Steve frowns. The werewolf looks pretty human to him. If you upgraded the standard model to firefighter, scaled it up by half a foot, packed on even more bulk, and added twice as much fuzzy, soft body hair as most men cultivate these days. Oh my god, Bucky sounds like he would be amazing to hug. I'm such a slut for a good hug, oh my god. You know, if I'm in the mood for a hug, I'm like a cat. I only want affection on my terms. Okay, no, never mind. He can see it. What's he doing in your bed? Natasha asks, her tone shifting from casual interrogation to target spotted. What's he doing in your bed? Yeah. I don't know. Look, I bit him, right? And then this guy bites me back, and Steve waves a hand silently and tries to put into words what it had been like, the giggly buzz of it as he stumbled along home, clinging to the lumberjack shirt and fluttering apart at the seams as his body lit up from the inside out. The guy's blood hit him like gin had before he turned, when his lightweight body would fizz into giddy drunkenness after 2 shots. Steve's stomach flips thinking about it, and he catches himself rubbing his free hand over his forearm, feeling the lingering sensitivity prickling just under his skin. A sudden memory resurfaces, nipping at the lumberjack's neck as they waited at the crosswalk, and the man laughing and holding him up by the armpits until the light changed, and then Steve pouncing on him once again. Nope, I said that backwards. And then Steve pouncing on him again once they were inside the apartment for a final nightcap. It brings new meaning to the "do you want to come up for a nightcap?" Despite already being more satisfied than he'd been in 8 decades. I almost said ages. No wonder he feels like he's been rolling around in a thundercloud. We sort of carried each other home. Here, I mean. Interesting, Natasha says. Hey, quick question. How much have we talked about werewolves? None. Neat. And you didn't meet any in Europe while you were kicking around out there? Not that I know of. Natasha pauses a moment, possibly staring down the demon she summoned, possibly adding notes to her "Steve is an idiot" file. I don't know if you heard it in my reading, but that was all capitalized. Steve is an idiot. And you bit him on the neck like you usually do? Sort of scented him up first and then bit right where the shoulder meets the neck? Yes, Steve says, because he'd bitten Natasha once, because she'd asked him to, italicized, and he'd felt woozy and high the rest of the day. His memories are blurry, but he knows the afternoon had included him and Clint swing dancing poorly while Natasha took a 3-hour bath in the living room. Parentheses. Natasha's mammoth living room clawfoot copper tub is another thing that she explains with auras. Okay, I just need you to know that when I say aura, I'm doing a special hand gesture that I learned from a show called, I think it's What's Wrong with Secretary Kim. It's a K-drama. Hysterically funny, by the way. Note to self to drop the link for that. Y'all might like it. Okay, so what happened is you just proposed, Natasha says, and he accepted. The last of Steve's buzz flattens out like week-old Prosecco. Proposed? That's generally how neck biting works for moon-oriented creatures. What? Steve asks, because sometimes Natasha lets slip something about how the axis of magic works when she is perhaps not supposed to. And by let slip, Steve means, purposefully dangles a tidbit of forbidden knowledge because witches have their own hobbies. What? Natasha replies. You said he bit you, right? I mean, bit you, not just a hickey. If you bit him and then he didn't bite back but slept with you anyway, then I'm sorry, your new boyfriend is a cad. No, he bit me, Steve says, feeling defensive of the complete stranger drooling on his pillows. I had to make a bandage out of a napkin and some cling wrap. Then it was reciprocated, lucky you. So you're kind of married now. All you need is the ceremony. Married? Basically married. Permanently engaged, anyway. Wares have their own deal. Natasha sounds much, much too casual about Steve's rapidly expanding personal hell. So you better wake up your blushing bride and tell him the happy news that it was an accident and you had no idea what you were doing. Steve says, strangled. I can't do that. You can't. He thought I was proposing and he accepted? Wow. Maybe he's just as dumb as you are, Natasha says thoughtfully. I can't just promise him a ring, take him home, drink from him 3 times in a row, and then wake him up the next morning to say, oops, just kidding. Steve casts around, looking at his wreck of an apartment. He doesn't usually bring people inside, so he doesn't. There's clothes everywhere. The apron he wore when he was doing lasagna bites last week is hanging off the bathroom doorknob from when he hadn't bothered to toss it all the way into the hamper. It's covered in marinara sauce and parmesan. I don't even have any good champagne. Okay, wow, Natasha says. You know what? Why don't you handle this your way and call me back in, let's say a week. Natasha, don't forget to invite me to the wedding, she says sweetly and hangs up. Steve stares at his phone. This is what they mean, he thinks numbly, by spine chilling. He'd always thought it was just a metaphor. Okay, that's the half-hour mark for anybody tracking it. It's been a half an hour. If you need to go drink or go pee or something, go do it. Remember, even if you don't enjoy taking care of yourself, the physical needs of the flesh are important too. You know, it's the only flesh suit you got. Take care of it, whatever. He'd always just thought it was a metaphor. The wedding. The wedding! This guy was willing to accept a marriage proposal, italics, after 15 minutes of flirty eye contact. He's probably not interested in a long engagement. And it's April, which means all of the good venues are booked for 5 months solid. What is he going to do? Well, besides make Natasha his best crone, witch of honor, something that forces her to buy a dress in a color and hold the thorniest roses he can track down in God flowers. Steve hitting a doom spiral of wedding planning. Already freaking out about all the details is just so... Maybe Steve's neurodivergent in this one. Maybe Steve's look at this... Hold on. Steve looks at the snoring lumberjack on his bed and thinks, fiancé. Because that's what he is. Steve has a fiancé now, and no venue, and no color scheme, and no menu. Jesus Christ! But maybe his fiancé has a place in mind? Family in the area? Do werewolves have big families? Is that just a stereotype? Steve lunges for his laptop. Time for research. No. Okay, oh my god, I just tried to scroll down with my mouse on the e-reader screen. I've got my hand on my mouse scrolling down, nothing's happening on the screen because I'm reading on my e-reader. Dweeb. 10 minutes later, he has 37 tabs open. What's that mean? My mind is like an old laptop? There's 14 tabs open, and I don't know where the music is coming from. Oh, how's that go? 9 tabs are local outdoor wedding venues. 14 are threads on werewolf culture on the more reliable supernatural fandoms. 3 are recipes for blood sausage, which Steve has just learned is a traditional post proposal breakfast for werewolf engagements. Hold on. 9 plus 14. That's 23. Plus 3 is 26. So he's got 11 Pinterests open. And the rest are all Pinterest. Steve hates Pinterest, but he's the idiot who proposed marriage without so much as a mood board, so he's going to have to suck it up and deal. Oh my god, he's a vampire. He has to suck it up and deal. Ah, I love bad puns so much. He's elbow deep in innards when his fiancée finally wakes up with a long, languorous stretch and a soft snort. Steve doesn't stop mixing the pork shoulder with blood and parsley, but he does look up and stare. He'd settled for pork blood because none of the forums had said what kind of blood, italics, which Steve feels should be the most important factor, but he is on a timeline and his butcher is very understanding and accommodating, even when Steve bursts through the back door in last night's eyeliner and just shouts blood at the top of his lungs. If anybody is listening who wants to make fan art, I think that would be an incredibly funny, silly little doodle. Steve bursting through the butcher shop yelling, blood! Last night's eyeliner. Granted, he's done that before, but usually not twice in the same 6 months. He'll need to give his butcher a few of her favorite pecan tarts once everything settles down. He left his bedroom door open so his werewolf fiancée would be able to see him and not think Steve was some sort of rake who got somebody in the family way and then took a train out west. Did this count as the family way? It felt like it did. Okay, part of the reason why I'm laughing is because I, in my formative youthful years, read a lot of trashy Harlequin novels that were either westerns or like Regency era romance novels that involved plots like this. Not the werewolf bit. That was less common in, the Harlequin era at the time. But like the rakish, you know, uh you got to speed run a marriage because you got knocked up thing. But Steve comparing accidentally blood marrying his new werewolf fiance with getting him knocked up. I don't know, Steve. Can you get somebody knocked up without even actually fucking them in this world building? Wow. Steve's mother is long dead, but she wouldn't have stood for anything of the sort. And Steve isn't going to disturb her eternal rest again if he can help it. Eternal rest is capitalized, by the way. It took forever for her spirit to settle back down after the last time Steve asked for her advice, and it hadn't even been good advice. As it turned out, asking an Irish woman from the 1800s, "What should I do with my eternal life to do you proud?" got the kind of answer that a vampire living in 21st century New York couldn't really use. He'd given up around the time he realized he had no clue how current farming practices even worked, much less how to explain them to someone who thought a steel plow was a fine invention but a little too expensive. Ma had given him an earful about asking for advice and not taking it after that. At least she'd been pleased to hear about women's suffrage and refrigeration. There's a shuffle and a muted thump from Steve's bedroom. In here, he calls, mixing this sausage slurry in a pot. That sounds so disgusting. Oh my god. He'll need to freeze everything for an hour, so he hopes a traditional brunch will do in Lu? I think that's a loan word we stole from French. So it's probably Lu. Lieu. Let's find out. Lu, yeah. In place of, instead of, in lieu of a breakfast. At least he has. Hold on. Oh no, cat hair in my throat. Hold on. I gotta go get a new drink. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back with my beverage. Today we are trying cranberry apple juice on top of vanilla chai tea. And except for the fact that I just dribbled down the front of my shirt because I can't drink from a cup properly, it's delicious. Let me put my headphones back on. I have put a piece of duct tape on the right side of my headphones, so I always know which side is which, even in low lighting. All right, I'm recording on the verified recording. I'm back. I'm back everywhere. I'm back in the Discord. I'm back on the e-reader recording app. Let's go. He hopes a traditional brunch will do in lieu of breakfast. At least he has string to tie off the casings. He isn't an animal. Oh, wait. Is that offensive? Is thinking that was offensive? Fuck. Hey. His fiancée shuffles into the doorway, shoving a mass of fluffy hair. Hold on. I've got to adjust my chair. I'm sorry if that was noisy. His fiancée shuffles into the doorway, shoving a mass of fluffy hair out of his face and scratching at the stubble around his chin as he blinks at Steve. He'd stripped off his pants and shirt to spend all night bear hugging Steve, and apparently feels no need to put them back on. Steve's bite is a happy little scar right along his neckline. Steve feels an inane need to reapply his teeth. It's all the sunshine, he thinks frantically. He's not used to it, and it's making him want to lick the warm glow off the lumberjack's shoulders, which is both not possible and deeply tempting. Steve gestures to the casing and slurry. I got the herbs and fresh pork, but it needs to set first. His fiancée's dozy eyes open a little wider, and he looks interestedly at the carnage in the kitchen. Blood sausage? Pork. It's all they had in stock. I hope that's... You remember when I was like, pause, I have to plug in my Chromebook? I plugged it into the wall, but apparently I did not plug it into the Chromebook. Okay, actually it's my roommate's Chromebook, but you know, I'm using it, so it's mine. Now it's plugged in. There we go. My gran made blood sausage for my papa back in the day. Steve's fiance's face gets warm and fond as he smiles. No sharp edges to him anywhere. and his voice is still a little husky with sleep. My gran made blood sausage for my papa back in the day. Steve leans into the counter, fingers clawing at the meat he's tearing barehanded. Hitch your star wedding turn a little traditional, huh? Steve swallows. I'm Steve, he says, instead of apologizing for... Well, his first instinct is to apologize that he didn't have the blood sausage ready to go, and his second instinct is to apologize for getting married at all, and both of those are very cart horse situations, so instead he just wants to know his very nice lumberjack's name. Since they're getting married and all, he needs to have something to put on the invitations. What a detail to fix it on. We're so relatable. Oh my God. Is this a good time to worry about the last name situation? Because he's had his last name for a very long time, and nope, no, he can put that on the angst shelf for later. Oh my God, Steve. You're so ADHD coded to me right now. Call me Bucky, Steve's fiance says, dimpled chin in hand, and staring round-eyed down at Steve like there's nobody else in the world. Nice to meet you, he says, weakly, trying to drown out the shrieking in his head that's looping between werewolves shouldn't be allowed to have eyelashes like Bambi, it's false advertising, and you proposed before telling him your name. That is both italicized and all caps. That is the level of internal freakout. So, Bucky, what do you do? I'm a nurse. I mostly work in the NICU with the babies, he says, offhanded, like it's not the most endearing thing in the world. He's a nurse working mostly with the babies, Steve's brain shrieks at him. In the body of a lumberjack firefighter with blood that makes me hear violins? I'm a cafe, he blurts. I mean, I own one. A cafe, that's what I do. I work there at the cafe. Fuck. The cafe fuck? Bucky says, looking charmed. Steve is sure hoping for charmed. Yeah, I mean, no. It's just called Captain Coffee. He winces. 100 years and he hasn't gotten any better at talking to built brunettes. It sure isn't any easier with his hands covered in pig viscera. Oh my God. Just the thought of that sensory experience gives me the heebie-jeebies. Honestly, it might as well be called cafe fuck. Oh my God, I did it again. I tried to scroll down on my mouse. Bucky's eyes get even rounder, now in concern. Is business bad? No, it's great, actually, Steve has to admit. People love the mascot, which I had to make because people kept asking who Captain Coffee was and why it was called that if there was no Captain Coffee. And anyway, there's a mascot now, Steve says depressively. We make little designs in the lattes. His hands make a vague cup-like shape in the air, like Bucky might somehow not know what a fucking latte is. Captain Americano is by far the customer favorite. Okay, I need y'all to know that not only am I making the hand gestures while reading, the first time I read this story, which was, I don't know, a year or two ago, I didn't get the joke, Captain Americano. I got the joke the second time I read the story, and I was like, oh my God, I love dumb puns. How did I miss out on this punny name for the coffee? It's a Captain America story. Oh my God. So funny. Captain Americano is by far the customer favorite. Neither Steve nor Ayo and her team of baristas need the stencil anymore. He's pretty sure he could do the design in his sleep, and probably has on shifts that run till noon. Faces and things. Why is it called Captain Coffee? Bucky asks. Because I was a captain, and it was supposed to say Captain's Coffee, but the sign maker forgot the S, but did have the apostrophe for some reason, but by the time they got the S delivered, the apostrophe had fallen off. Steve mutters. He's not over it. By then, everybody was calling it Captain Coffee and asking who the captain was, and I was tired of explaining, so. You were a captain? Bucky says, installing himself, still very much bare-chested. Picture Steve, like, clutching his pearls in shock, on the stool across the island. Steve's eyes stick on the scar on Bucky's neck and can't move away. Like, on a ship? In the army, Steve says, jerking his eyes up. Are you allowed to bite more than the once with engagement bites? Lord in heaven, he hopes you're allowed to bite more than once. Oh God, if he has to keep going out to feed, is Bucky gonna think he's cheating? He's absolutely gonna think Steve's cheating. What if Steve bites another werewolf by accident? Steve is not ready to become a polygamist. He's gonna have to pick up a second career robbing blood banks. Steve, you ridiculous creature. As Steve is dazedly contemplating this abrupt change to his schedule, Bucky scoots his stool closer to reach out and puts his hand on Steve's forearm. We don't have to talk about it, he says, face worried and kind. Oh God, he thinks Steve is traumatized by his time in the army and is standing there staring at nothing because he's got shell shock. The use of italics all over the place is so funny to me because that's literally how I think half the time, at least. Like, if there was a transcript of my thoughts, there would be so many, like, old style purple prose capitalizations and curly cues and italicized phrases. I have an extra toothbrush, Steve says, because his hands are still full of meat and his mouth is watering, and he will never finish the blood sausage at this rate. And a shower. Steve ruffles his hair a little and stretches. Good call. Oh my God. Bucky ruffles his hair. Wow. If you don't mind bringing work home, I'd love a coffee. Steve nods, and then Bucky stands there looking at him. And then there are two idiots standing in a too bright kitchen with Steve's hands covered in pork and parsley before Bucky leans over and kisses his cheek. Draw whatever you want on it, Bucky says, before he wanders off to find the bathroom. Oh my God, what a sweetheart. This is a POV switch. Bucky is stripping the wrapper off the extra toothbrush when his bundled jeans buzz noisily against the stone countertop. He brought his clothes into the bathroom to put back on after he's washed up, since Steve kept staring at his bare chest. And distracting someone who's making sausage is a good way to accidentally get more blood in the mix than intended. When he turns his jeans upside down, his phone slides out of his pocket and into the sink. Oh God, I hope the sink wasn't wet. It's just going to be Becca sending him another, "Did you die? You died, didn't you?" text, because he's been too busy meeting the love of his life and getting engaged to respond to her last selfie. His phone buzzes again. It is from Becca. No, for serious, it's honestly kind of been a while. If I'm making jokes about this and your body is actually stuffed in a dumpster somewhere, you're going to scar me for life. Bucky replies. I met someone last night. We're getting married. Smiley face. And it's the old style emoji, the colon and the parenthesis. His phone rings 30 seconds later. Have you been caught up in some kind of supernatural trafficking ring? Becca says in lieu of hello. Are you being held against your will? If you are, just say you're fine, then I should stop worrying. But I am fine, Bucky says, still riding high enough on the incipient matrimony that he can forgive Becca and her negativity and paranoia. You should stop worrying. He can hear the dopey smile in his own voice. His name is Steve, and he's wonderful. Oh boy, Becca says. She doesn't sound particularly thrilled for him. All right, this is fine. Just hold tight. Can you describe where you are? Laugh if you're still in the city. He didn't kidnap me, Bucky says, indignant on Steve's behalf. He made me blood sausage. Blood sausage, Becca, with anise. What? Is that some kind of herb? Also called aniseed or anix, a flowering plant in the whatever native to the eastern Mediterranean region in Southwest Asia. Flavor and aroma similar to star anise, fennel, licorice, and tarragon. Okay, I only know licorice out of those things. That does not sound like a nice flavor to me. But how do we say it? Who the hell is Bucky? Anise. Anise, okay. Anise. It's a short I. The seed-like fruit of this plant is used to flavor liquors and candies. It's an aromatic herb. Okay, whatever. And I already caught him planning our first full moon. I don't even know what fennel tastes like, Roxy. I've got no idea. I've never come into contact with that I know of. Of course you caught him planning your first full moon. They always plan your first full moon. Even my middle school boyfriend Adam let me catch him planning our first full moon, and that plan considered of maybe buy her a candy bar, Becca says. Did this plan include murder him while he lies around in a digestive torpor? Did Adam's? No, but mine sure did, Becca admits. His plan was to get me a candy bar. Please sort out your crazy before Steve learns what he's marrying into, Bucky says, as acerbically as he can manage when he's still full of the gumdrops and roses and beefsteak feelings brought on by his engagement, and hangs up. I love the fact that the werewolf's happy feelings includes beefsteak. I'm so glad you're enjoying the fake Roxy. I hope you got some rest, even if you didn't get some sleep. Are we good to keep reading, or do you need a break for like food and bathroom and stuff? Okay. Chat, we're taking a quick break. Pausing the e-reader recording. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of my big fat werewolf wedding. It was actually like 59 minutes and 19 seconds, but close enough when I cut off the last recording. It was also good timing for me to pause, because not only did I stand up and discover that my bladder was full, because you know that thing where like you're only elusively connected to your bodily needs as like a neurodivergent person, and you like never realize that you have to pee until it's a fucking crisis, or you like stand up and the pressure changes or whatever. Anyway, that was maybe TMI, but a large part of my reading style is apparently TMI, and nobody seems to mind. People seem to like it, especially when I go deep into the neurodivergent experience, because it's like, oh my god, you know, doing the Spider-Man pointing meme. It seems to be validating to a lot of my listeners, and by a lot, I mean like the 5 people that responded to me in that fashion. By like, oh, you're being autistic out loud? Oh my god, you know? It's like one of my inspirations for the bedtime stories series is the YouTube channel I pitch a lot, Gay Watch. Her name's Brittany, and she is very open about having ADHD and being bisexual and just all of her like queer and neurodivergent life experiences. And it's just very like validating and affirming to hang out in a space like that. So I wanted to, you know, keep that energy with my, it's not a channel, but I think of it as a channel. That's right. We love Out and Proud, whether it's queer, neurodivergent, both, whatever makes you, you know, weird and special. Live it, love it. If you don't have a weird and special identity, get a weird and special hobby. Or both. All right. Got to go back to the story. Not my longest off-topic intro ever. That was only like 2 minutes. Do you know, when I got divorced that one time, I lit a lot of things on fire, and it was very satisfying. Also, when I graduated college, I destroyed a lot of my notes. That was a shredder, though. It wasn't fire. You got to do it in a managed area, though. Like a bathtub with a good vent if you're indoors, or a burn pit. We don't want smoke alarms or, you know, like accidental carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay, so the story. We just switched to Bucky POV, and he is full of gumdrops and roses and beefsteak feelings. His engagement. Moon and stars, he's engaged. He presses his fingers to the scar on his neck and closes his eyes. That's right, put your phone down. All right, I hope you do get to sleep this time, but if not, please enjoy the story during your relaxed, closed eyes time. The memory is rosy tinted and sparkling at the edges from that first moment he'd felt canines dig into his throat. His shock. Oops, hello, little buddy. Hold on. Gotta pause for a second. I'm back. Little buddy just needed some milk. Okay. The memory is rosy tinted and sparkling at the edges from that first moment he'd felt canines dig into his throat. His shock had given way to disbelief and then a rush of slow dawning delight. He'd known right then that the beautiful stranger who'd enticed him out of the bar had felt the same sense of instant connection Bucky did. Oh, hold on. I gotta scoot my chair around. It's so noisy. Oh, okay. It wasn't just Bucky getting carried away by the exuberance of his newfound freedom in the city away from family. Finally. No, it was a sign. It was destiny. Those are all italicized, by the way. Becca made fun of him for reading every book in the Moonstruck Love series until the spines fell apart. But there Bucky was, pinned to a wall by the most handsome man he'd ever seen, who was Bucky's true mate, probably, and even smelled like pie. Those books are fucking documentaries. Bucky turns on the shower, which helpfully drowns out his still buzzing phone, and starts getting ready for his first full day with his new fiancée. And that's a scene break. After the most amazing brunch of his or anyone else's life, and several giddy hours of, this is quotations, getting to know your newfound other half type conversation, Bucky eventually goes home because even true love can't induce him to wear the same club reeking clothes for the rest of his life. And Steve had seemed a bit antsy after their meal, so he probably needed a good run. City life gets rough, Bucky knows, what with not being able to let out the inner wolf much. And Steve's job sounds stressful, even though his heartbeat never showed it. And he was cool as anything when he described the high pressure chaos of pulling the last minute catering job together. Excuse me. Which was very sexy. It's going to be so fun when they can take a trip out to the family range and really race each other. Oh no, I'm sorry, that says race together. Yep, together. Bucky scrubs glitter out of his chest hair in a happy haze, imagining Steve's wolf shape, which must be graceful and lithe. Graceful and demure. And wonders if he should start waxing. The men on the Moonstruck Love covers are always bare-chested, but Bucky's favorite uncle has chest hair long enough to braid. What's up, Norbert? Maybe he should aim for somewhere in the middle. He's changing into clean sweats when his phone vibrates. He sighs before he looks down, but it's not Becca. She must still be organizing the rest of the pack for a Skype intervention. Unknown number. Does anyone in your family have any allergies? What do you think of ivory cardstock and royal blue ink for the invitations? This is Steve, by the way. I got your number from your phone while you were sleeping. Sorry if that's creepy. That's like 5 successive messages. The texts arrive one after another in the space of 30 seconds. Oh my god, Steve even texts like an ADHD kid. Bucky smiles down at his phone, absurdly charmed and also incredibly relieved. He can't believe they were so enraptured. They forgot to exchange numbers, italics, thereby almost recreating the exact plot of Miss You in Manhattan, which is deeply moving, but involves a little too much moping on the subway for his taste. He saves Steve's number with what's probably a slightly excessive amount of moon and heart and sparkle emojis. Alright, and then he replies to the message. I need y'all to know that Bucky's texting style is lowercase letters only, just like mine, whereas Steve's is incredibly proper grammar. Uncle Mark's partner is allergic to tree nuts. Ivory and royal blue sounds great. Smiley face. Steve, with all the hearts. No tree nuts, got it. How do you feel about serif fonts? Would you like to come over for lunch tomorrow to, I'll make, honest to God, that word looks like a sneeze. Bulla blah. What the fuck is even that? Some kind of meat dish, I would bet. But, you know. In or out, Norbert? Like, pick one, jeez. Alright. Some kind of soup looking thing with tomatoes. A French seafood stew. Okay, but how do I say the word? Bouillabaisse.
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 Bouillabaisse. Okay. Made of several kinds of fish and shellfish. A highly seasoned stew. That's number one definition. Number two is a combination of various different, often incongruous elements. Okie day. Whatever. No. Come back. There we go. And Bucky replies, I'll be there. Heart, heart, heart. And it's the old-fashioned emojis. Oh my god. I have come to a time of my life where there are old-fashioned and newfangled emojis. What is this life? Anyway, it's the just the text emojicon, whatever. That's the little bracket, angle bracket, and the number 3. There's a 15-second pause before Steve sends back 3 hearts. Oh my god, Norbert, dinner out, yo! You spoiled little prince. I brought your food out here. Did I forget your water? Is that what we're upset about? Yeah, get that bug. Get it. Anyway. Steve sends back 3 hearts. Blue instead of the yellow ones Bucky sent. Aww. Adorable. Bucky presses the phone to his neck. Oh, I guess the old-fashioned emoji hearts were just to bypass AO3 being weird about emoji icons. Bucky presses the phone to his neck, rubbing the smooth glass over the still unfamiliar ridge of his new scar. The newly healed skin magnifying the experience of the texture. Norbert, get off the porch screen. Oh my god. Magnifying the experience of texture. He pulls it away again when his phone buzzes, but it's just Becca, so he puts it on silent before the texts from concerned cousins start to crescendo in earnest. They can talk at the wedding if they can get a word in edgewise over the aunties and uncles. Bucky is so funny, oh my god. They're both so funny. Okay, this is a POV change. No, not a POV change, just a scene change. Wedding planning is easier than Bucky expected, probably because Steve does most of it. He seems really knowledgeable about things like claw-friendly wedding favors and the many ways table settings are affected by traditional pack dynamics, which honestly Bucky has no clue about, as great-grandma Myrtle points out to him about twice a month. Bucky gets presented with a lot of moments of Steve going A, B, or C, and thrusting some papers or swatches or individual flowers at him, and then whisking it all away again when Bucky bemusedly points at one or another. At this point, Bucky's just like, I'm just along for the ride. It's really romantic. Nobody's ever paid so much attention to Bucky's preferences before. When he was little, there were always 5 or 6 pups at a time, tangling around feet at whichever house the kids washed up in when they got hungry. What are you hunting, Norbert? What do you see? The sun's coming up, so Norbert's having some zoomies. He is a very crepuscular creature. I just think that's a fun word to say. If you didn't know, crepuscular means the type of animal that is most active in twilight. So sunrise and sunset, like dusk, dawn and dusk. Sometimes I take Norbert out on walks. He likes my backyard a lot because there's this little lizard colony. Um, but he also likes the courtyard in the apartment complex because there's like butterflies and flowers and this one set of bushes where I swear to you, a stray cat that is like Norbert's doppelganger lives in. All right, please enjoy the rest of the story with the backtrack of Norbert losing his shit. When he was little, there were always 5 or 6 pups at a time, tangling around feet at whichever house the kids washed up in when they got hungry. So they were generally treated more or less as a whole. And when he stood out, it had always been because of his size. No, oh my god, Bucky's the baby, the short baby of the family. Norbert, I'm not taking you for a walk until the sun comes up all the way. Cool your jets, yo. Shit. Steve is even smaller than he is. Taller, but sleek. Everyone in Bucky's entire extended family has always and without exception given him concerned looks and pushed food on him like he's still going to be growing now at full adulthood if they just cram enough red meat down his maw. I'm getting the feeling that Bucky's like early 20s in this story. You know, just left home, living in the big city, um, full of romantic ideals, fed by a lot of sensational media choices. I am laughing at him because that's what I was like in my early 20s. Because you know how, like, when you're neurodivergent, you don't age the same way neurotypical people seem to. Like, however old your body is chronologically, your mind doesn't match up sometimes. Because, like, technically, I'm almost 40, but I don't feel that old or, like, experienced, confident, whatever word you're going for. Like, I still feel mentally the same way I did when I was in my 20s. I'm tired more because my body has symptoms. But, like, mentally and emotionally, I just, what's it? Some days I'm older than dirt and decaying, but other days I'm like tiny child, confused. Anyway, back to the story. Um, it's given him maybe a weirder relationship with food than is normal for a werewolf. Fuck that word so much. Normal. Don't judge yourself by normal standards. Judge yourself by what works for you. Oh my god. But Steve is also little. So he's not making food for Bucky because he's worried about feeding up the runt of the litter. He's doing it because of love at first sight. Italicized. Man, I really hope y'all are still getting the voice through Discord because it's like glitched on my screen. I'm gonna drop out and reconnect. Did you know? Click your avatar in the lower left corner to set a custom status. Oh, I didn't know you could do it like that. Cool. Okay, but now how do I get out of it? Press escape. All right. Yeah, no, I'm still here, Roxy. Um, Everything is fine. It's just my screen froze up, so I wasn't sure if I was still um, broadcasting or not. Bucky gladly eats everything Steve puts in front of him, and it makes Steve smile every time. He and Steve see each other every day. Bucky would be happy to move into Steve's apartment and crawl into his bed and keep them both there for a week. Oh my god, I just saw the part where you said you're logging off. Have good sleeps, Rocky. Rocky, oh my god. Roxy. Have good sleeps. Oh yeah, sometimes I have to take my headphones off too. Sometimes I have to put my headphones in the freezer because they get too hot. Sometimes, as much as I like the hug on my ears of headphones and like the noise blocking times, sometimes my ears just get like overheated and I start to feel sweaty and I just can't do it anymore. I've been thinking about getting noise canceling earbuds. I've heard about those, or like noise canceling earplugs. Um, but expense. Maybe I can swing a nice pair for like Christmas or something. Oh my god, it's the cat. The other cat. I just saw the other cat. It does exist. He and Steve see each other every day. Bucky would be happy to move into Steve's apartment and crawl into his bed and keep them both there for a week. But Steve has been so traditional with everything so far that Bucky's not surprised he's waiting until after the actual ceremony to take that step. Is your family interested in whether or not the nuptial stone is moon drenched? Steve asks, setting a mug of tea down beside where Bucky is fending off four different relatives who still use AOL Instant Messenger to harangue him for details about the new fiancé. All right, there is another word that I have never actually pronounced out loud. Harangue.
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 Harangue. A long, pompous speech, especially one delivered before a gathering, a speech or piece of writing characterized by strong feeling or expression. A tirade. This is a word that I picked up meaning through context. I've never actually read the definition before. A speech addressed to a large public assembly, a popular oration, a loud address to a multitude, in a bad sense, a noisy or pompous speech, declamation, ranting. Okay. Werewolf lifespans are great, but it sure makes for some bizarre applications of technology. I know they'll never know, but if it's important, no one is going to wonder if the stone was left out in the moonlight for a week unless it starts to grow mold, babe. Bucky takes the tea and just holds it, luxuriating in the attention. But if it's important to you, I can take care of it. Hey, I'll even mention it to my most gossipy uncle to make sure everyone knows and you get points for it. It's not about the points, Steve protests and leans in to scent Bucky's hair like Bucky is the last kebab on the buffet tray. Is it your hair? He's sniffing. Bucky, are you sure? He's asking about the moon-drenched nuptial stone. Gotta go, Bucky types, because it absolutely is about points. Then snaps his laptop closed and tosses it onto the armchair in order to grab a double fistful. Yeah, I'll make breakfast, whatever. a double fistful of Steve's shirt and drag him down onto the couch with him. Would you make up your mind, Norbert? Where do you want to be? Steve may be waiting for the wedding night to actually lose the clothes entirely, but he sure is happy to get half undressed and cuddle Bucky's brains out. That's so nice. Oh, that sounds so wholesome. Norbert, what the fuck? What do you want? He's like, I want you to take me for a goddamn walk. That's what I want. You useless human. There may be a little nibbling at mating scars involved. Bucky thinks it's so charming. He might internally combust how Steve always asks beforehand and gets slow-eyed and dopey afterwards, rumbling something like a lion's growl deep in his chest and rubbing his face against the scar for the rest of the evening. And Steve blushes so easily all night afterwards, so tactile and adoring. It's no hardship to wait. Hold on a second. Does Bucky not even notice that he's being fed upon? He just thinks it's cuddling every time. Like, I'm sure it is cuddling for Steve also, but incredible. Love it. This is like the fourth time I read this fic now, and I still find new things to delight in each time. All right, this is a POV change. Sometimes Steve feels guilty about living in blood-drenched carnal sin with Bucky, biting him as often as he does, without even having a ring to show for it. But not bad enough to actually stop when Bucky pulls him down on top of him with that smile. And anyway, Bucky never shows any of the signs of anemia that would bring Steve to a hard stop. Steve will make liver for dinner again, just in case. He doesn't actually need to feed this often, but Bucky gets so loose and relaxed when Steve drinks from him, dragging Steve's head down to tuck under his chin and wrapping him up affectionately after, while they talk softly until Bucky has to go home for the night. That Steve can't help but want to keep their evening nibble routine going, even though they haven't done the ceremony yet. Oh my god, they adore each other so much. They're so fucking cute. Everything he's read about werewolves say the romantic structures aren't very inhibited, though. So maybe the family won't mind? God, hopefully they won't ask. And that's a POV change, scene break. Steve is only inviting 3 guests to the wedding. None of them family as far as Bucky can tell. Bucky hasn't asked outright. Talking about his past makes Steve visibly depressed. And that, together with the way the bite Bucky left on Steve's neck took 2 weeks to fully scar over, convinces Bucky that Steve doesn't really have a pack right now. In book 3 of the Moonstruck Love series, Xavier had succumbed to lone wolf sickness, that's all caps by the way, after being cast out, and he'd been pale and slow to heal until he and Vanessa had come together on the night of the full moon. And anyway, Steve is also pretty pale, and he's definitely healing too slowly to be healthy, although he's still faster than Bucky and almost as strong. Bucky doesn't think any less of Steve for being on his own. He'd probably gotten dramatically ejected from his pack of origin after protesting an injustice. There's a lot of caps in that sentence too. That sounds like a very Steve thing to have happened. Steve still gets worked up about the 1954 midterm elections, Bucky has no trouble imagining a long-running family rift that's led to Steve being on his own in New York. That's fine. Bucky has more than enough family for them both. The closer they get to the wedding, the more convinced Bucky is that they're all going to love Steve as much as he does. Scene break and a POV change. Steve is going to spontaneously combust on his own wedding day, and it's not going to be thanks to the beautifully clear sky over the state park pavilion they're renting for the occasion. He hasn't had any severe reactions to sunlight in decades. It's going to be from stress alone. He handled most of the catering, because of course he did. And the flowers, because of course he did. And hand-lettered every place setting, because of course he did. And refused every effort anyone in his undead life made at helping him, because of course he did. I think Steve has some control issues. The sole exception he made was for Bucky, who one night took Steve's face in both hands 5 strategic seconds after being bitten, when Steve was high and in love and hearing string quartets, and said, "Sweetheart, let me handle the suits and rings for you, at least." And Steve was besotted and, well, blood drunk. So he said yes, before he could figure out why his overclocked future self, strung tight with vampiric adrenaline, might say no later. Luckily, Bucky has an excellent sense of Steve's style after only a few months. Gee, Steve, I think that might be because you've been showing him all the color swatches ever. If he's paid even an ounce of attention, he knows exactly the things that you like. He's probably seen your Pinterest boards too. Luckily, Bucky has an excellent sense of Steve's style after only a few months, and knew someone, that's in quotes. Because Bucky seems to have a family member who does or lives almost anything anywhere Steve could come up with. Outside of the city limits and with plenty of room to run around howling, of course. Which is why Steve has never run into a werewolf before, as it turns out. Steve sticks pretty close to packed urban centers. It's a relief to think that he probably never came close to biting any other werewolf. Because if he had, then he wouldn't have met Bucky. But it's retroactively terrifying to think that if Bucky had never resisted werewolf convention and braved the sensory overload of the city, then he wouldn't have met Bucky. Hold up. I am now projecting that Bucky has another flavor of neurodivergence. They're neurodivergent for neurodivergent. Well, it's probably... Hold on. In any event, Bucky came through on both suits and rings spectacularly, and Steve had been enthusiastic with his praise, and then Bucky had been enthusiastic in receiving it, and ... Well, it's probably just as well Bucky's relatives rarely make the trip into town, despite keeping constant contact across 18 or so technology options. They would probably smell the blood from the front doorstep. Steve's mind comes to a hard stop. Oh no. Will they be able to smell it on Steve? This is about the half-hour mark, by the way. Like, take a drink, do things if you need to. Steve is right in the middle of dredging duck breasts with orange molasses glaze. That sounds tasty. And manfully resists the urge to go shower immediately with oven cleaner. Ew, oh my god. Family is so important to Bucky, with one thing or another, mostly to do with Steve planning a wedding in just a few months without his business going under, and spending every last remaining second of free time falling in love with his fiancée. Steve hasn't met any of Bucky's family yet. This is his first impression. It has to be good. God, they're letting the baby of the family marry a vampire. It has to be perfect. Steve sets the duck aside for Kamala to finish in the broiler before the reception and wipes his hands. He needs to clean up and get moving. And shower with bleach, seriously. And that's a scene break. Bucky and Steve are meeting Bucky's mom and his sister Becca at the venue ahead of time. Half of the pile of relatives will be ridiculously early, Bucky has assured Steve, and the other half will just be very early. Apparently, werewolves set aside the entire day for a wedding and show up far ahead to get the party started as soon as possible. Which means Steve has to have everything impeccable starting right now, immediately. He is vibrating out of his skin. Hey, Bucky stops him rearranging the lilies for the 6th time and cups the back of his neck and pulls him down to rest his head on Bucky's shoulder. Sweetheart, they're gonna love you. Steve says, but manages not to eviscerate any table settings before he hears the car pull into the parking lot outside. Bucky perks up like a dog on point, and then bounds out the door and down the steps. And Steve wishes he could see himself in the mirror, because what if he isn't up to standard? Italics. And then 2 women are getting out of the car and wow. Wow. Steve stares. Bucky is big, a few inches shorter than Steve, but with arms that regularly tear seams and thighs he could crush coconuts between. Steve had mentally noted werewolves, almost ridiculously large, in the new mental file he'd created when they met, and had nodded along knowingly whenever his research had referenced it. But Bucky's family, well, Steve works very hard not to gape at his soon-to-be mother and sister-in-law as they get out of the car. They are each easily 7 feet tall and look like they floss with elevator cables. He is going to die. Again. And it's a scene break and a POV change. Bucky is getting married. Better yet, Bucky is getting married to Steve. He barrels into Becca and is immediately enveloped in an enormous hug, which is the only kind werewolves give, generally. He didn't realize he could be even happier, but seeing family again for the first time in months lifts him that little bit higher, and even he can tell he reeks of it. Satisfaction and joy, and how much he loves Steve. Not just love at first sight anymore. This man is perfect. And Becca and Ma are going to adore Steve and feed him and tuck him into their family And Steve is going to be so happy too. Bucky is so adorable. He's such a cinnamon roll in this story. Oh my god. Becca pauses in her hug and pulls back, brow furrowed, to look at him a little funny. She's probably about to tease him over the whole perfect bliss thing. So he cuts her off and drags her up the steps. Becca, he says, as she stumbles to a hard stop in front of the absolute love of his life. Bucky totally gets it. Steve's sheer, unadulterated beauty can catch you funny sometimes. She smells fully shocked now, though, which is weird. Maybe she just hadn't really believed him until she got here. Well, that'll teach her. This is Steve. Steve, this is my sister, Becca. Becca looks at Steve. Steve looks at Becca. Wow, Becca manages after a moment. Huh, you sure are Steve. Yep. Steve's making that constipated face he does whenever he has a big fight brewing in his head, but for the sake of civilians and or customers is actually holding it in. Bucky looks back and forth between the two of them, his stomach sinking, as he wonders what could possibly be going wrong already. Bit him first thing, Becca says slowly, cocking her head the way she always does when a difficult problem finally resolves into sense. She puts her hands on her hips and looks Steve up and down, which is completely unnecessary since Bucky has definitely texted her enough pictures. She's seen that shoulder to waist ratio before. No wonder. Okay, well, hope you don't mind fur in the punch. Rude. Steve goes from banked anger to relieved and then right through to insulted. He ends up settling on indignant. I have provided a cover, he huffs. Hey, Ma, Becca says over her shoulder, not taking her eyes off Steve. Her scent has eased down from imminent nuclear threat level, but she's definitely still alert. Come meet Steve. Oh, it's so good to finally meet our new son in fur, his ma gushes, bustling up with 4 heavily engineered boxes of food. I am purposefully doing his ma with a very as close to soprano as I can get, because I think a 7-foot tall werewolf with a voice like a flute is funny as fuck. His ma gushes, bustling up with 4 heavily engineered boxes of food. Bucky, look at you. I've been so worried you'd be wasting away out here in the city, but you look wonderful. Still, let's get some food into you, darling. I brought some snacks. How you're standing all these people tucked in so close, gracious. I can smell everyone who has been here in the past week. Why, there was even a Winifred Barnes pauses, sniffs, and frowns. She turns to Steve for the first time and actually does a real life triple take. Oh, she says, tension skyrocketing again. Astonishment and horror billow off her like an essential oil diffuser gone rogue. Hello, Steve, I didn't. She trails off, glancing over at Becca. Becca gives her a wide-eyed rictus of a grin and gestures in a way Bucky can't parse. If you'll excuse us, Steve interrupts, smooth but tense, and grabs Bucky by the arm to pull him out of earshot, which, everyone being werewolves, means going right out the back door of the venue and across the street. "Did you even tell your family about me?" Steve hisses when they're far enough away. Now Steve is acting weird, and if he was more anxious than Bucky had ever smelled before, earlier, he's through the roof now. Bucky stares. "Are you kidding me? Becca blocked me on FaceSpace because I literally never shut up about you." FaceSpace. "Look," he says, unlocking his phone and scrolling through texts. If Bucky had any shame in him at all, he would probably be a little embarrassed that every text to his own sister over the last 2 months was some variation of, "Look who I got, isn't he hot and perfect?" Or, "Hey, guess what sweet and amazing thing my mate did today?" All caps. Mixed in with stealthy photos of Steve's arms while he kneads bread. You know, just appreciating the aesthetics, I'm sure. Ooh, excuse me. Steve looks a little mollified as Bucky shows him day after day of constant public adoration. But then he suddenly snatches the phone out of Bucky's hands and squints at a series of texts. Slowly, he turns his face back to Bucky. "You told your family," Steve says, "that I'm a werewolf." "Yes." Steve, wild-eyed, throws one hand out to gesture meaningfully in the direction of the wedding venue. "You didn't think that eventually," he manages, "they would find out?" "Well, yeah," Bucky says, confused. "But I didn't want to keep them in suspense. They'd think I was dating a human, since they didn't know of any other werewolves living in the city. They'd decide I had had a breakdown and married a mortal like Uncle Mark. I'd come home to an intervention." Steve, for the first time since Bucky has known him, has gone perfectly, almost unnervingly still. "Babe, I know weddings stress everyone out, but you've done everything you could possibly do, and it's gonna be fine." "Steve, I know. It's gonna be fine," Bucky offers. He takes his phone from Steve's limp hands and chafes the cold fingers comfortingly. "I wonder what had Ma so worked up, though," Bucky muses, looking back at where more cars are pulling in. "Have I lost weight? She's always getting on my case to eat. Oh, look, Becca's coming over." "We are going to talk about this," Steve hisses. And then suddenly, Bucky's surrounded by unsettled smiles and anxious werewolf scent as far as the nose can sniff. The whole morning goes like that, and as more people show up, they all react in a pretty similar way. It makes sense that real-life weddings aren't 100% soft, soft-focused romance. But Bucky can't find it in him to care, since he is marrying Steve Rogers' perfect mate, italics. It doesn't stop him being a little, italics, miffed, though, and everyone keeps saying things that are apparently steeped in meaning but make no sense. And he swears he hears his aunt saying umpire at least twice. All right, I gotta pause for a beverage. Hello and welcome back to Bedtime Stories. We're gonna finish reading My Big Fat Werewolf Wedding. I think that's what it's called. But I've already scrolled down to the spot I was reading it last, so I'm not gonna check the title. We have here with us today my author friend Buy Book Demon, who is actually the reason I started podficking this particular fic, besides the fact that I wanted to because it's funny. I wanted to read it to them as a bedtime story, and I'm here. Yes, it is my big fat Greek wedding reference. That's right. So I'm in Discord live streaming on air in my recording studio, which is my setup on my front porch right now with my e-reader and my third-hand, extremely busted up Chromebook that still works if you have a keyboard that you can plug into it and a Bluetooth mouse. Haha. So, I've got Buy Book Demon here in the voice channel with me, and if he has something to say, there will be a notification to me in the chat, and I'll be like, go for comment. So if you hear that phrase, it's because BBD is about to say something. All right. So when we left off, the last paragraph was Bucky thinking to himself, it makes sense that real life weddings aren't 100% soft focused romance. But Bucky can't find it in him to care, since he is marrying Steve Rogers' perfect mate, all italics. It doesn't stop him being a little miffed, though, and everyone keeps saying things that are apparently steeped in meaning but make no sense, and he swears he hears his aunt saying umpire at least twice. And this is a scene change and a POV change. Oh my god, I just saw the GIF. Houston, launch control. Go for launch. All right. Steve is going to bite through his own lips. And he didn't even do that when he had first turned. Worst case scenario has happened. Worst case scenario has happened. That's all italics. Bucky has waited until now for everyone in his entire almost immortal extended family to find out Steve is a vampire. Steve thinks in italics a lot. And so then Bucky's Uncle Jim says, laughing and swinging a bottle of local small batch in a wide arc. Bucky says, but which arm? The where he's talking to starts to crack up. They're both at least 6.5 feet tall and built like brick bunkers. This is a quick reminder that one of the funny details earlier in the fic is that Bucky is considered like the runt of the family at 6 feet tall. And Steve is actually a little bit taller than Bucky in this fic. More slender than Bucky, because Bucky is built like a firefighter on steroids, according to Steve. So it's a thing. It's a whole thing. He's built like a baked bean. All right. Steve can probably run fast enough to get away from Bucky's family if need be. But if anyone gets a good grip on him, the show is completely over. Anyway, so I say to him, I say, kid, I know it'll grow back eventually, but it's not like in the meantime we have a spare. Both werewolves get a nose full of Steve at the same time, and the conversation stops like a veteran crash dummy. They slowly turn, metaphorical hackles raised in a way that implies literal ones might come up at any moment. Hi, Steve says pointedly. Thanks for coming to my wedding. You're Steve? The woman says, wide-eyed. Steve just looks at her. Steve, who made blood sausages from scratch? Oh no, that's Uncle Jim talking. Steve, who made blood sausages from scratch the morning after? Jim chokes out, agog. Steve, who made a first full moon feast complete with brachial. Is that a hard C or a soft C? What the fuck is even that? What the fuck is even that? This is when you should play the elevator music. Do, 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 do. Insert Jeopardy theme song. Italian cuisine dish. Braciole. Braciole. It is spelled Braciole. Braciole. Okay. Thank you for that information, random YouTuber. Apparently it's a beef dish. Braciole. Braciole. Whatever, okay. Not actually important to the story. Steve stands up a little straighter. Even at his full 6'2", he's topping out right around clavicle level on Bucky's uncle. Bucky's traditions are important to him, so they're important to me. The woman looks at him a long time. Are you at least Jewish? She says finally. I'm not really comfortable taking part in most organized religions. Steve takes a careful sip of his wine, red, since he's just completely given up on being subtle at this point. And the two wares take a moment to digest this. No, the man says weakly, you wouldn't be, would you? I called this, the woman is waving her chalice-sized glass of Chardonnay at the uncle in victory. I said, damn, Jimmy, it's as if the fiancé went and binge-researched Wikipedia for every romantic tradition since my great-aunt Bellatrix was a baby. I said... Steve opens his mouth, closes it, and finally says, Wikipedia is not a reliable source. That's what I said, Jimmy exclaims, rounding on the woman and gesturing with both of the beers he's apparently drinking in series. Steve can't handle it anymore. He is going to burst into bats. He retreats to the only place not full of werewolves, just learning they're at a bispecial wedding. That's italics. Which is a custodial closet in the basement. Closes the door and leans back. Can we just appreciate the author's choices to use Wikipedia? Because that's so funny to me. Okay, the facts. Fact 1. Bucky has never shown any curiosity about vampire customs, lore, habits, predilections, or observances. Steve had vaguely assumed this was out of respect for his supposed war trauma, or more likely because Bucky was aware that, well, there wasn't really that much to know. Vampires, falling as they did on the more solitary, one might even say temperamental, end of the supernatural spectrum, wow, were less enthusiastic social niceties than your more gregarious types. Steve likes to think he's made the best of his unlife, but he hasn't imagined the details would ever interest anyone, even the world's sweetest and most adoring not lumberjack. Still, the fact remains that the V word has in fact never actually been spoken. Fact 2. So true. Forget autism as a spectrum. Supernaturalism is a spectrum. Extremely mindful and demure. Yes. Fact 2. Bucky hasn't ever been ashamed of him or worried about his family's or anyone else's reaction to their engagement. What Bucky mostly wants is to run around the nearest public park at Mach 5 or climb as close to on top of Steve as the social situation will allow. Adorable. Steve was the one to ask Bucky to cut down the wedding guest list to fit the venue. Bucky would have been happy to have everywhere he had ever met stuffed into the place well beyond max capacity and straight into riot hazard territory. Yes, this story, Bucky is adorable as fuck. He's just so cute. I think some silly goober drawings of Bucky the werewolf and like Steve the vampire as a cat would be fucking adorable, actually. Fact 3. I know you can make it happen. That's why I suggested it. Bucky, on this most trying day of days, continues to behave with blithe confidence that all is well, despite the 4 separate times a wolfy relative had nearly spat out their drink after getting a good whiff of Steve. Bucky even chased off after a gaggle of pint-sized nibblings at some point, and left Steve to deal on his own, which was a cruelty Steve didn't think Bucky was capable of. Bucky wouldn't have left him to weather this ordeal alone if he knew what was happening. I have faith in you. You can absolutely make it happen. All of which means that Bucky doesn't know. Oh shit, Bucky doesn't know. He needs to talk to Bucky right now. Bucky is over by the dining tables helping his cousins get their toddlers into high chairs, which is significantly more complicated when the toddler has the muscle density of an Olympic weightlifter and absolutely no compunction about biting, clawing, and flailing like a landed eel. Come on, sweet pea. Sit down so you can have your lamb chops, one of the mothers says firmly, dragging the kid's legs through the chair holes, while Bucky grimly tries to keep the frilly frocked 2-year-old from savaging him with any part of his upper body. Vicious. We need to talk, Steve says desperately. Some shred of his ex-animate soul is holding out hope that all of this is just one big misunderstanding. I mean, I guess you could call it that. That's a scene break. It isn't a misunderstanding. Okay, Steve says, when Bucky just stands in the basement closet and looks concerned. Okay, so I bit you when we first met. Yeah, Bucky says slowly, leaning in a little. That's why we're here right now. I remember. His mouth is starting to curve up at the corner into Steve's very favorite warm smile. Top 3 for sure. Oh God. Steve's sluggish heart is twisting itself into a truly painful gymnastics contortion. Okay, Steve grits out, because there's that part done. Well, have you noticed that I don't like the sun and don't smell as strong as everyone else and don't heal quite as fast as you do? Did you notice the blackout curtains? Yeah, having to work those weird hours at the cafe must be killer, Bucky says reasonably. I can't imagine trying to sleep while the sun is still up. Of course you need blackout curtains. Wait, is this about your past? You're right. Killer. That's funny. Is this about your past? Steve pauses at the capital letter Bucky somehow managed to pronounce. My past? Bucky takes his hand and gives him a look that at any other time probably would have Steve melting into a puddle of pallid, love-struck goo. Sweetheart, you know that. Do you know of any other supernatural beings who bite necks? Steve interrupts, desperate. Any at all? Who maybe would do it pretty normally the first time they met you? Bucky frowns. Well, I mean, just. There is a long, awful, gut-churning pause. No, Bucky says. Yes, Steve says. But you, Bucky manages, squinting. But you made. I know. But you knew about. I know, Steve grinds out. I know I did, because you're important to me, so I researched it. I thought you knew, too. That was italics. How would I know? Bucky says weakly. You said you had all those health issues. Sure. Before the vampirism, Steve swallows painfully. If you want to cancel the wedding, I understand. The closet door slams open. Steve and Bucky. Oh, hold on. Big truck going by. Hold on. Oh, no, I think that's the garbage. They're coming by for the garbage pickup. Which is good, because it was really fucking full. I could barely fit my trash bag on top. But also noisy. I'm going to pause and get a drink while this is going on. BRB. All right, we're back. The closet door slams open. Steve and Bucky both jump and scramble backwards, tangling their legs together and almost falling into the mop bucket as Becca shoves into the closet and closes the door behind her. There's a lot of her to shove in. Reminder, Becca is Bucky's sister. Listen, she hisses, jabbing a finger into Steve's chest. We are not canceling anything. You bid it, you bought it. Got it? Becca. Bucky grabs her shoulder. His other arm is still wrapped around Steve. Neither of them steady on their feet. Steve's a vampire? Steve's a vampire. Steve rubs his back automatically, then remembers that maybe Bucky doesn't want Steve to be touching him right now. He tries to disengage, but dropping his hands just makes Bucky cling harder to his waist. Our mother is out there, Becca continues, relentless. Oh my god, I know. The first time I read this fic, I almost cried, like during this particular portion. Our mother is out there, Becca continues, relentless. Our grandfather is out there. Great Grandma Myrtle is out there, and she expects to see a wedding. You are marrying my idiot baby brother, or else. Picture me making very expansive, vivid gestures to mimic Becca's attitude for that paragraph. Steve draws himself up and glares at the general region of Becca's chin. Nobody... Oh my god, Norbert. Can you pick in or out? I am trying to read a story. Norbert is personally offended by closed doors. He's like, I need to be able to access all of my territory all the time immediately. Hi, Norbert. Hello. So Norbert does this thing where, like, if the door is closed, he will lengthen himself up as tall as he can go with his paws, which is almost to the door handle, and like do the swipey paws thing and until I open the fucking door. He's up on my office table now. Yep. I don't know if he's checking on his territory or like the other people. Maybe he needed to go use his litter box. I don't know. He's very polite about his litter box habits. Like, firmly polite. Emphatic. But he doesn't go anywhere he's not supposed to go, except for, like, when he's mad at me, he'll poop next to his cat box. Your dog is so silly. Okay. Nobody's forcing Bucky to do anything he doesn't want. Duh, Becca says. So what he wants is to marry you, whatever you are, she adds pointedly. Oh my god, Bucky says, visibly brightening. This is just like Moonstruck Love, Forbidden Passion, except without the duel at the wedding. Hopefully. Wait, do you have an estranged sire who might show up and object? I love Bucky, the romance novel aficionado. No, not, anymore. Good, I'd rather skip that part. Honestly, Bucky says, voice dipping low like he's committing heresy. It was kind of cliche. There's a thump outside, and the door jerks open again. Why are you all hiding in the maintenance closet? Bucky's mother demands, wedging inside. One of the shelving units collapses and sends cleaning products cascading down to the floor. I can smell the anxiety across the room. Did Bucky pop a tail again? He always did lose control of his shift when he got stressed. I never popped a tail, Ma, Bucky protested. Steve isn't going to marry Bucky anymore, Becca tattles immediately, which is honestly jarring coming from someone who could bench 3 of Steve, even without the werewolf strength. What? Winifred yelps, looking as if she's going to take Steve by the ear and drag him outside. She probably could. He's going to leave my baby at the altar? I think I might have pitched that a little too high. Was that understandable? He's going to leave my baby at the altar? No one is, Steve tries. And then she actually drags him down by the ear. Since she's aware and taller than Steve is, she then drags him right back up again. Now, you listen here, Winifred hisses, and Steve would nod if vampires could grow back ears. James has always been small and different. He's never eaten enough. He's always wandered too much. He's... Way to convince him, Ma, Bucky interrupts. Tell him about when I used to run around Aunt Tilda's flower patch naked as a kid. That one's super sexy. We all run around Aunt Tilda's flower patch naked at least once a month, Becca reminds him. Aunt Tilda runs around her flower patch naked. James right now has at least 30 pounds on the peak I ever fed him up to, Winifred continues, ignoring them. If you think I'm going to let you just walk away from... Hey, what's everyone doing in the closet? One of Bucky's innumerable uncles asks, poking his head in. I thought our James was all done with closets. It's a little hard to keep it under wraps, he adds, giving Bucky a look, when you marry one of the undead in front of God and everyone. Especially when everyone includes Cousin Ethel before she's even eviscerated her first elk of the day. No one is going to even look at Cousin Mark sideways again after. Hey, don't call him undead, Bucky snaps automatically, just as Becca announces, Steve is dumping Bucky and running already. What? Says the uncle, and piles into the closet to the loud snap of mop handles splintering under the strain. No one said anything about leaving Bucky at the... Our James may be the weird, deviant runt of the family, but he's Uncle Daniel. Don't call Bucky a deviant, Steve says, as threateningly as he can manage, with his head still tipped sideways from Winifred's super strength grip on his ear. I told you this story was funny. He's marrying a vampire, Uncle Daniel says. Not anymore, Bucky's mother wails. Well, he's sure not if you all keep threatening him and telling him what a tiny runt of a freak I am, Bucky shouts. There's the sound of a throat clearing, seconds before the closet door is ripped away, hinges twisting and popping out of the frame in a squeal of metal. All the collected Barneses fall silent as a shadow looms across the doorway. What's this? Great Grandma Myrtle says mildly, storm clouds almost visibly gathering behind her towering white-haired head. What's this about Rogers here not marrying our James? Of course I'm marrying him, Steve shouts. Bucky's mother drops him and squeezes sideways to leave him eye to pearl choker with Great Grandma Myrtle. Steve straightens his tie and surreptitiously touches his earlobe to make sure it's still attached. I love him. He's my mate. The wedding's only off if he doesn't want to get married. Bucky throws his hands into the air. He smacks Uncle Daniel in the nose in the process, to Steve's silent but vicious satisfaction. Of course I still want to get married. Good, Steve yells. Then there's no problem. We're getting married in 2 hours, and everyone can just deal with it or leave. Great. I love you. I love you too. Becca and Bucky's mother exchange glances. 2 hours, Becca says slowly. That seems like a long wait, since you're mates and all. You want us to do it now? Because I'll do it now, Steve says heatedly. I am ready. I will wed right now. That was italics. Oh, I just saw you said, yeah, that's right, slay, Bucky. Good. Great, Grandma Myrtle, Becca, and Winifred all say in unison. So it's good, good, and good all at the same time. All of them grabbing some part of Steve and hauling him out of the closet. Uncle Daniel, after a brief slap fight, tows Bucky along behind. And that's the scene break. Let me take a drink. That was a lot of acting. I'm a little sweaty with the amount of effort I put into that scene. Comment. I just imagine Bucky those cartoon mad poses where their backs are slightly arched, hands at their sides, fists clenched. Oh my god, yeah, totally. Okay, next scene. Steve has to change into his wedding tux last minute, which was always the plan, given he was going to be handling all the food beforehand, and he refused to say his vows with pear sauce on his jacket. You do need to draw that sometime. If you draw it, I will post it with the Podfic. But it's a little more stressful than he initially expected, given he's doing it now with 3 werewolves at his side, all trying to help, but mostly invested in their argument over how to properly tie the bow tie. Y'all, that's what YouTube is for. There are so many folks with opinions on how to tie ties on YouTube. They're also all outside, protected only from indecent exposure by the confluence of Steve's catering van and Bucky's cousin Hannah's regular everyday van, parked abutting the gazebo. 5 car seats of varying sizes are visible through the windows. Ties are overrated. I think bow ties are overrated, and I don't think people should be forced to wear the traditional, Oxford knot tie. However, personally, I fucking rock a tie with a button-up shirt. So I like it. You just don't tie it as tight. Give it a little wiggle room at the throat. Leave that top button actually unbuttoned so it's not choking you. I do know how to tie my own tie. I've got a nice one. It's pink and blue with little sparkles. No, not the keyboard, Norbert. No. Yeah, no, if you don't like wearing ties, don't wear them. I got it on super markdown at a department store one time. The GIF is loading. Hold on. Suits. Take my money. All right. Hey, says Bucky's Uncle Daniel, who followed them out of the basement and is showing every sign of having a great time now that he's come around to the whole marrying the undead situation. Sorry for that noise. I had to adjust the position of the table in my chair. He's about to crush Steve's tie, but Steve isn't going to say anything when a werewolf has a strip of silk around his neck. He might not need to breathe, but he needs his head attached. You turn into a bat, right? Steve pulls a face and makes a sorta kind of gesture. Uncle Daniel hums. Bats have fur, at least, he concedes charitably, releasing Steve's tie. There's the fangs, too, the other uncle offers, stuffing Steve into his jacket and spinning him around to frog march him back to the venue. I mean, bats kind of look like tiny flying wolves. So generous of them. At least you're a furry, in spirit. We guess you can join the family. There's the fangs, too, the other uncle offers, stuffing Steve. Oh, I already read that part. Marrying a vampire isn't so bad. You might even be able to keep up with Bucky when he goes running in his fur. The third were is skeptical, but apparently willing to be persuaded. He says you feed him well. Steve gestures at the catering van on their way past. The wearer looks considering, then nods. Yeah, okay. Could be worse. Could be a veterinarian. Everything goes extremely quickly for a wedding where half the attendees look like they're just waiting for the part where they are all invited to stand up and object. Bucky is hustled up the aisle after him. The crowd hushes, and Bucky's aunt, the mail order officiant, starts talking double time. Thankfully, the hold your peace part is skipped altogether, and Bucky says he does, and Steve says he does, and then record screech. Wait, says the only human in the room, and therefore the last poor schmuck. Hold on. Hey, if you need the fic, you write the fic, yo. Wait, says the only human in the room, and therefore the last poor schmuck to realize what's happening. It isn't that she's loud, really. It's just that everyone else in the place has supernatural hearing. I volunteer as tribute to help you put together the rest of the Stucky lore that you need to feel marinated in the fandom enough to feel qualified to write fic about it. I have a list. Wait, hold on. Is he a vampire? Is your cousin marrying a vampire? Yes, hisses the wearer sitting with her, positively gleeful. We aren't the black sheep anymore. My mother is finally going to have someone else to complain about. Oh, thank God, the woman says back, and this is the final nail in the coffin. The 3-month stretch of high-speed wedding planning, capped by the realization that his fiancée didn't even know they weren't the same species, winds up, stretches out like a rubber band, and snaps in to hit him all at once. Steve draws in a deep breath to tell Bucky that they're fucking eloping. Only right then, he feels the familiar, dreaded tickle somewhere under his breastbone. Oh no, he manages. Right before the full stress response hits, and he explodes into 573 bats. That's my favorite line in the whole story. 573 bats. What a specific number. Because when you were saying earlier that, bats are tiny flying wolves, and Steve was like, sorta, and I knew what was coming. I didn't want to spoil it, but it was so hard not to spoil it. Okay. 573 bats. Bucky, to his credit, startles but then immediately lunges forward to try and catch most of him. Steve, now feeling the acute embarrassment of having disintegrated at the goddamn altar, has to struggle not to scatter into the nearest dark places he can find, as his beautiful, bespoke tuxedo gently deflates onto the pavilion floor. The swarm mostly coalesces around Bucky, but even his shoulders only have so much room. And then his 1,146 tiny, unbelievably sensitive ears create a three-dimensional surround sound experience in his tiny bat brains of the entire wedding party, separately and collectively, losing their ever-loving minds. I didn't think I was going to be able to finish that paragraph without laughing, but I did it. Okay, that's a scene break. Okay, this Bucky's POV now. Bucky is ready to howl, but if he starts, he's never going to stop. Uncle Mark has tears streaming down his face, laughing so hard he can't get more than a few words out at a time. Relatable, yo. Welcome to the family, he wheezes, clearly secure in the joyous knowledge that no one is ever going to talk about his own wedding ever again. Now that you're joined in, don't you dare say it, Mark, Bucky threatens, shaking a finger at him. He's holding one of Steve in that hand, though, so he just ends up shaking a disassembled, animalized portion of his groom at his cousin. He's got one of Steve everywhere. 12 Steves in his jacket, 3 in his pants leg, 7 held cradled in his arm, and maybe 5 or 6 in his hair. Scores more are clinging desperately to every fold of his tux, including one tucked up under his collar, shivering like a tiny, overwrought velvet bow tie. Don't you fucking say it. Joined in holy matrimony, Mark finally squawks out. And Bucky almost goes toothy right then and there. Mark's human wife has sucked her lips between her teeth, and her eyebrows are almost up to her hairline in delight. But he gives her a dirty look and shakes a Steve at her too, before turning to cousin Jenny and shouting, "And if you even think of sending that tweet." Jenny pauses mid-tap. Then she looks at him dead in the eye and hits post. Bucky finally loses it. "I will disown the lot of you." That's all caps. He bellows at the crowd. And if he's always been the talked over baby runt, it wasn't because he lacked the volume. "I will disown Thanksgiving. I will disown the Lunar New Year. This is my husband." Bucky thrusts the Steve in his immediate grip into the air like Simba at Pride Rock. "This is my beautiful, perfect husband who loves everything I am, and you will cherish him and respect him as much as I do, or so help me." There's a pause where Bucky thinks someone might giggle, and it'll all be over, bar the blood feud. But then great Grandma Myrtle gets ponderously to her feet and starts clapping and whistling. When Great Grandma Myrtle claps, so does everyone around her, mostly out of self-defense. Maybe some of them are looking a little sour, and maybe a lot more of them are doing it for the pure drama and hilarity of the moment. But on the upside, Bucky isn't going to go down in Barnes family history as the only family member to get laughed out of his own wedding. The batty, beautiful husband. Okay. Now either help me collect him, Bucky says, or get out of our way. Steve's flutter and resettle to hang from his elbows as Bucky stalks over to the main table, upends the centerpiece, and extracts the basket. But he doesn't object to being stacked in there one bat at a time. That's a scene break. I'm pretty sure this is the last scene. Do the golf clap. Go for it. That scene deserved a golf clap. Okay. Natasha is looking sleek, perilous, and extra small considering the company despite her towering high heels. Oh, we're back to Steve's POV, by the way. So you decided on a whim to just get married 2 hours early. Steve shifts uncomfortably, but is absolutely not going to burst into a cloud of bats for the second time that day, especially since Bucky had only just found the last of him, curled up on the wainscoting above the east corner of the pavilion, and finally put the ring on Steve's finger and a tongue down his throat maybe 10 minutes later. He's still missing one sock. And it didn't occur to you, Natasha continues in a dangerous note in her voice, to maybe text your wedding party to let them know. Are you kidding? Sam says, arms already weighed down from the buffet. He has 3 salmon croquettes juggled in his left hand and is chewing through what looks like 2 more. I was going to be stuck in these shoes standing upright for longer than I have since basic, and now instead I get to loosen my tie and head straight for the open bar? It's not even my fault. I have 0 guilt, and I get to make fun of Steve for it for the rest of my human lifespan. This is the best wedding ever. You said I should work this out on my own, Steve says, slightly defensive. Well, it worked out. Natasha looks over his shoulder. I bet Steve had a huge pout on his face when he said that too. Natasha looks over his shoulder to where a dozen of Bucky's nieces and nephews are bunching together and then exploding outwards over the lawn, shrieking with laughter. In a game Steve is carefully not paying attention to. He's especially not noticing how they keep yelling, "Bat bomb! Bat bomb! Bat bomb!" before dispersing. Did it, Natasha says. It definitely worked out, Bucky repeats firmly, taking Steve's hand, and every wolf within 15 feet probably hears Steve's heart give a single, emphatic thump. There's suddenly a lot of totally not subtle camera activity and also a certain amount of eye rolling. Steve determined, oh my fucking god. Okay, we're just gonna skip that one. Ignores that too. It hasn't been a perfect wedding, but so what? At the end of the day, he is standing next to Bucky, who'd carefully scooped up all of his 500 odd bats and held up a tablecloth so Steve wouldn't have to change back into his tux in front of the many interested eyes of the party guests. And that was what really mattered. Bat bomb! Clint bellows from the epicenter of a roiling swarm of howling were-kids. Steve's eye twitches, but then Bucky's gaze catches his, and he smiles, Steve's number one favorite smile, almost blinding even in the comfortable dusk. And Steve knows that at this moment, the both of them are finally, truly on the same page. The wedding is over, and now it's all smooth sailing into the honeymoon. Scene break. Checking out the comments. Oh my god, bro, you should totally put bomb audio on the soundboard. That would be so funny. Epilogue. Sam. This is a text thread. Bucky sent photos of the honeymoon. Image attached. Natasha leans across Clint, his totally mundane dog, and the very not mundane demon, with a capital D, demon, perched on the sofa arm to steal the popcorn bowl back. This requires snacks. Sam. I didn't know vamps could get freckles. Look at him. He's like a slug, mummified in terry cloth, hidden under that umbrella, and he's still bright pink and covered with them. Natasha replies, there are some things humans aren't supposed to know. Back to Sam. Yeah, okay, witchy McScares a lot. See if I send you the rest then. Bucky's stealth shot of Steve napping on the beach did, in fact, make him look like a terry cloth slug. He was swaddled in more layers, in more towels than Natasha would have thought even a resort could provide, with bright purple sunblock on his nose, and he still had the complexion of a freckled lobster. A creased paperback copy of Moonstruck Love, Necks in the City, was propped open, spine up on his chest. Oh my god, he's reading Bucky's favorite book series. That's true love, folks. Fucking adorable. Natasha considers. A new shipment of griffin eggs is due on the 15th. She needs all the leverage on Steve she can get. He's ridiculously protective of his walk-in cooler space ever since the ravioli incident, which should never have happened in the first place. 7 Moss Poultice base doesn't even look like pesto, and it's not her fault Steve didn't read the label. Natasha replies, fortunately, you are among the favored few. And Sam says, you're damn right I am. Hey, are true mates, that's capital letters, actually a thing? Like, at all? Hey, yeah, Clint says, pulling the popcorn bowl back into range of the dog like he thinks she wouldn't notice. He and the demon are both craning their necks to read the text. I thought you said that wasn't a thing? The demon looks as curious about it as anything with no eyebrows can. It cocks its head and nearly takes out Clint's laptop with its horns. It's absolutely not a thing, Natasha assures them. It's like the whole vampires wearing long capes and seducing breathless virgins in the dark thing. It's a way to sell books with fantasies of big scary predators meeting and falling in love at first bite. So, like, about as credible as the garlic bread masochism scene in 50 Shades of Red, Clint says, chewing with his mouth open to cover the sounds of the dog licking up the kernels he's dropping. Clint, you are not sly like you think you are. The demon's forehead crinkles. So not credible at all, Natasha says, texting Sam the same thing. Sam, I'm pretty sure big scary predators falling in love at first bite is exactly what happened here. Natasha is typing. Natasha, you know, humans already don't live that long. Sam, image attached. Natasha tilts the phone until what looked at first glance like a very lumpy fur rug in front of the fireplace resolves into a napping wolf with hundreds of tiny bats roosting in his fur. The blurry outline of claws at the bottom edge of the picture show how Steve managed to get the shot. Can you just picture, like, if this was a movie, the bat holding the phone and just hovering in place, maybe a team of them working together to take the picture? I could be a bat, the demon says thoughtfully. We support you, buddy. Clint reaches out and pats one of its horns without looking up from Natasha's phone. Might be cheaper to feed you if you were a little smaller. Not that you shouldn't pick whatever size you're comfortable with. But if you want to stay here long term and you keep taking up the couch every night, I'm going to start charging you rent. Natasha cuts in. Natasha smiles. I usually deal in favors. The demon looks at her, then at Clint, then down at the dog, and back at her. One soft implosion of air later, a dainty fruit bat is perched on the couch. The demon chirrups and gestures with one delicate wing at the popcorn bowl. Natasha adds the pictures Sam sent to Steve's blackmail folder. She doesn't know how she's picked up so many strays over the centuries, but she has to admit, they do keep life interesting. And that's the end of the fic. So this is actually the second podfic of this story. The first one was by Quiet Night, who I believe is also one of the authors of the story. And there's some art too for y'all to check out. Visit the original, drop a kudos, leave a comment. Oh my god. So thoughts? Did you like the story? Thanks for staying awake a little bit later than you planned to listen to it. But it was so funny. I just wanted you to hear the end of it. Like, the first two parts are funny. Well, you know, not necessarily the first two parts, but like the first bits of the story that I read to you are funny, but they're just the setup. The wedding itself is the funniest part, in my opinion. Haha! I have officially infected you with Stucky. Okay, just a fair warning. this story is one of the more lighthearted Stucky fics that I've read. The stories for Stucky, just like with Wangxian, range in tone from, straight up womp, which is not my thing. I prefer hurt comfort. I don't mind somebody being, tortured by the author as long as the comfort is going to happen. So there's like some very intense action and like nasty stuff going down because it's the Winter Soldier timeline, ranging all the way through to lighthearted, cracky stuff like this. But they're so fucking cute together. Okay, want might be fun for the author, but if you don't include the comfort part, it's not fun for this reader. But that's why tags exist. I can nope out of any fic that is not for me. Okay, so to the listeners of the Podfic, thanks for tuning in for this session of Bedtime Stories. And a special thanks to our special guest, By Book Demon. And I hope to be back with another fic real soon.